Okay, we'll begin at this time. Good afternoon, everyone, and for those that are joining from our western provinces, I would say good morning still at this time. We are so glad that you took this time out of your day to join with us on this webinar entitled "What Will Your Legacy Be? Leaving a Legacy of Love." Today, we're joined coast to coast throughout the country with about 160 folks that are signed up for our webinar today. So thank you so much for being a part of this. It truly is an honor for us to present on this very important topic. Of course, for those of you that don't know, the month of May in Canada is known as Legacy Month. And you may have noticed, whether in print newspaper, digital, online, a lot of talk throughout the month about the importance of legacy thinking or legacy planning, whether that's related to estate planning. And in this case, what we're talking about today, the important subject of end of life planning and memorialization. So thank you for signing up as well, whether you found this webinar through a social media posting on Facebook, or whether you were at one of our Arbor locations, funeral homes or cemeteries, and saw the advertisement and scanned the QR code. We're glad you made the decision to be with us today. As we move throughout the presentation, you will notice there is a chat link in the bar that you can feel free to use as we're going through. If you have any questions or comments, you can place that in the chat, and we will come back to that at the end of the presentation today. Also, at the end of our presentation, for those of you that signed up, you will receive a recording of this session as well. And so without further ado, we will jump right in and begin our presentation today. So welcome. My name is Scott Lockwood, and I am the General Manager of Community Relations and Development for Arbor Memorial. I am a licensed funeral director, and in my role with Arbor, I have the privilege and the honor of traveling throughout our locations, coast to coast, providing public education seminars on all things related to end of life conversations, the importance of pre-planning and memorialization, grief and bereavement and aftercare services. And it truly is an honor for me to serve in this capacity. Previously, I served as a pastoral minister in both Ontario and Alberta, and I maintained my certification in thanatology, which is just a fancy word for the study of death, dying, and bereavement. A little bit about who we are at Arbor Memorial. We, as a company, were founded in 1947. We are very proudly Canadian and family owned, now operating over 40 cemeteries and about 120 funeral homes now across the country in most of our provinces. And our vision at Arbor is that we put families first, right at the center of everything we do, creating end-of-life events that celebrate their loved ones in a way that is meaningful to them. And we truly live by that creed. We believe that every individual, every family is completely unique, and therefore every remembrance should be just as unique as well. In 2003, just a couple of years ago, while maintaining our proud position as thought leaders in the industry, Arbor Memorial formed what we called the Legacy Council. And the Legacy Council brought together thought leaders from different areas of our society, from the academic world, from the healthcare clinical world, from spiritual care, and so on and so forth. And these thought leaders gathered together to have a discussion centered around the changing perspectives of death, dying, bereavement, and legacy planning amongst Canadians. We know that our demographic is ever changing coast to coast. And one of the results of that Legacy Council was a nationwide survey that went out to Canadians coast to coast, asking the question of how they define legacy, or what's most important to them when they think about their legacy what they will leave behind when their time comes. And some of the indicators that we observe from that survey you see on the screen in front of you. Canadians, when they were asked what is important to them in legacy planning, in what they will be known for, in what they will leave behind. And it's interesting that by far and in a way, the most important legacy indicator for Canadians was family at 59%, followed very closely by friends at 41%. Much further ahead than traditional thoughts around legacy building, like success or wealth building. And so that really speaks to something very deep and very meaningful when we think about, even those of us on this webinar today, when we think about what we will leave behind or how we want to be remembered. What seems to be the greatest indicators is how our family and friends are looked after, how they will remember us and honor our lives. Just for a working definition, when we think of legacy, your legacy is the total of your life experiences. It's your beliefs, your values, your traditions that are passed on from generation to generation. In other words, it's the good, the bad, and everything that we leave behind. And I want you to think about this very important statement just for a moment. We all leave or will leave a legacy. The question is, do we live with that in mind? And in our context today, we're talking about this in the realm of end-of-life planning. What will be the legacy that we leave behind and how we are remembered? Now, today, if you're struggling or you thought it to be a struggle about having conversations regarding planning your own legacy and how you want to be memorialized, it's important to know you are definitely not alone. That survey that I already referenced from the Legacy Council showed that while 92% of Canadians acknowledge the importance of sharing their end-of-life wishes, only 43%, less than half, have made their end-of-life arrangements, or at least have communicated their wishes to their loved ones. Think about that for a moment. So the great majority of Canadians coast to coast say, yes, you know what, it's important that we talk about our end-of-life wishes and plan for them. However, we see this disconnect where less than half have actually followed through with those conversations and those planning steps. Of course, the question needs to be asked, why? Well, what is the disconnect? Maybe some of us on the webinar can relate to these areas of disconnect. Thoughts like, well, I have time, right? I'm still young, I'm in relatively good health, so therefore I will eventually get to it. I know it's important, but I have time. For others, maybe it's just the topic itself is a little bit taboo. I don't feel comfortable talking about death and dying, or as when I try to bring up the topic with my children, they don't want to talk about it because they think I'm just going to live forever. Or of course, the timeless disconnect or excuse, I'll eventually get around to it. And isn't that really so true with many things in our lives when we think about planning for the future? But especially when it comes to this all-important topic of legacy and planning how we want to be remembered, keeping in mind that the most important aspects of that planning, our family and our loved ones that we leave behind, that we'll eventually get around to it. Well, it's interesting that studies have shown that of the 1/3 of Canadians who started these planning conversations just this past year, 57% said that the conversation with family, their significant others, spouse, children, loved ones, 57% said the conversation went as they expected. 24% felt that it was a tough conversation. and 19% found that it was less difficult than they had imagined. So when you look at that data, what that says is over 3/4 of the conversations that were had, 76% of Canadians that had those conversations said that it went as expected, or in fact, it was less difficult than they were anticipating. It reminds me of that timeless saying that says, sometimes the anticipation of something is worse than the reality of it. And what we have found when it comes to these all-important discussions of legacy, how we want to be remembered, and considering our end-of-life planning and wishes, what we have found is when those conversations are had in the broader context of legacy planning, that oftentimes they go over well, better than expected, or at least what we expected, without being tougher than we thought or we anticipated. So maybe you can relate with this statement today. Often people simply don't know where to begin. How do I begin the conversation with my spouse, with my children, with my loved ones? Where do I start when it comes to planning my legacy, when it comes to looking after those that are most important to me, my family and friends, when I'm gone, when my time comes? Where does the conversation begin in investigating and navigating my own end-of-life planning? Well, that's where Arbor Memorial certainly can help you. So think with me about this for a moment. Most of us purchase insurance to prepare for the worst. Isn't that true? We purchase term life insurance. I know that I have term life insurance right now. I'm 45 years old, and I have that life insurance in the, unforeseen, or hopefully, God forbid, where something happens and I pass away. I have that insurance for my family that they will be provided for. For some of us, when we travel out of country, we purchase travel insurance, or we purchase health insurance. In other words, coverage, planning ahead for those events that we hope won't happen, where we'll have to activate that insurance that we've invested in. Well, if we invest that way in those matters that we hope won't happen, wouldn't you agree that it makes sense that we would invest in that which we absolutely know with certainty will happen? And what I mean by that is, sorry to say to all of us on this call today, that the truth is, the nature of our humanity is that one day we will all pass on. And therefore, the question becomes, what is the legacy that we leave behind for our family, our friends, those relationships that are closest to us? So what we have discovered at Arbor Memorial, as we help families navigate these all-important discussions, is that we want to look at pre-planning, or talking about our own end-of-life wishes in the broader context of legacy planning. When we think of legacy planning, often we think of financial investments for the future, retirement plans, estate planning, ensuring that we have a will that is updated, perhaps power of attorney documents when that time comes. But often so is the case that all-important part of end-of-life planning, our funeral or memorialization or cemetery planning, is often left out of the discussion. And so what we encourage at Arbor Memorial when we talk about facilitating these conversations is to consider our end-of-life planning as a part of, a significant and integral part of, the overall picture of legacy planning. Planning for end-of-life decisions is an essential piece of the bigger picture. Why? Well, some of the reasons are in front of you on the screen. First of all, you can discuss the options openly with family in a relaxed environment with clarity of mind. I mentioned that I am a funeral director, and when I have served over the years families that have experienced the loss of a loved one, a lot of times over a short period of time, they are trying to make a multitude of decisions while grieving. And a lot of those times, those decisions can be rushed, or they are hoping they are fulfilling what their loved one wanted, but not necessarily sure. Well, one of the advantage of talking about these things and pre-planning in advance is that you can discuss the options openly in that more relaxed environment with a clarity of mind. There's the cost-saving potential of up to thousands of dollars. In funeral service, when you pre-plan, you get a guaranteed funeral contract that when you prepay that, it locks in today's current prices of your selections for memorialization. Like any other industry, we know that inflationary costs only continue to go up, and the cost savings can be astronomical with pre-planning now, so as to secure protecting against inflationary costs in the future. Planning ahead also gives you many choices to fit with your budget and needs. We're very proud of the fact that our trusted advisors at Arbor Memorial, both for funeral and cemetery, are able to work with every individual in every family with any type and every type of budget to understand what your unique needs are and what's most important to you. And perhaps one of the most important advantages of planning ahead when we think of legacy is knowing that decisions are taken care of and financial arrangements are made. It can be a relief to know that they are looked after, no different than we plan ahead with investments and with estate planning. We can live life fully knowing that our end of life wishes, how we wish to be remembered, are looked after as well, and therefore our loved ones, spouses, children, friends will not have to carry that burden when the time comes amongst the grief that they are walking through. So at Arbor, we often say we like to make the process of planning one's legacy and end-of-life wishes as easy and clear as possible. And we've come up with what we call a very simplified 4-step solution to planning. And what I will do is walk us through these 4 steps. First of all, and perhaps most importantly, when you sit with one of our trusted advisors to talk about these important plans, we recognize that every individual in every family is completely unique. And everyone comes to these conversations carrying different perspectives, life experiences, thoughts, values, considerations. And so the first thing we do is truly listen to understand with clarity what your unique needs are. We take the time to learn about you, to consider and discuss your unique situation and your wishes. What makes us different is our understanding of what makes you unique. Secondly, we compile all of your pertinent information. Let's face it, planning for end of life and legacy planning can be overwhelming and at times emotional. So we offer what we call our free estate planning kit to assist in gathering the paperwork ahead of time. With this estate planning kit, you can easily detail the whereabouts of all important documents, record personal wishes, and compile lists of important numbers and contacts, creating a single and essential resource for your executor, for your family members at the time of your passing. It becomes an invaluable tool. And we're able to walk you through that process in compiling all of the pertinent information of what will absolutely be needed at the time of death. Thirdly, we then work together to create your unique plan. As I mentioned at the beginning, a part of our vision at Arbor Memorial is that we inherently believe every life is unique, and therefore every remembrance should be just as unique as well. There's no 2 funerals, no 2 celebrations of life or memorializations that are completely the same. So once your needs have been determined, our trusted advisors will gather the documentation. We can help you and your loved ones gain a better understanding of the many options that are available to you and to your loved ones that fit with your traditions, with your unique perspectives, your wants, and your needs, that reflect your taste, culture, and also, importantly, your budget as well. Whether you begin the process with funeral plans in mind or cemetery plans, considering burial or cremation, we guide you in selecting the right plan that is for you. And the truth of the matter is, today, it seems the sky truly is the limit when we think about memorialization planning and celebration of life. Perhaps traditional values are still important to you. Maybe the traditional funeral of having your body present for family to come and to gather, to be present, to honor the tradition of faith values are important to you, whether that be in the context of a funeral home or your church or other place of worship. Perhaps you are thinking cremation and the many options that come with that, memorializations or celebrations of life that look completely unique and tailor-made, that tell the story of the life of the deceased. Or perhaps you're thinking of something totally non-traditional, a gathering that we often refer to as a time to remember, where instead of the traditional eulogy at the funeral, maybe friends and family are gathered and over wine and cheese have a toast in celebration to your life as they share stories and reminisce together, offering support to one another. Whatever it may be, my friends, what I am saying is the options for memorialization are vast and multifaceted. And our trusted advisors not only take the time to consider your needs, but to go over what all of those options would be that would be tailor-made to fit your expectations, your wants, your needs, that match your traditions and values as well. The fourth step to our solution to pre-planning is that final stage in the arrangement process where we identify the value of your investment and work together to create a financing structure that comfortably suits your lifestyle and budget, with ample time to discuss best payment schedules and options with families. And again, the options are vast in this area as well. Perhaps you are in a place where you want to look after everything in full immediately, or over the course of a year, or 3 years, or 5 years, or 10 years, or beyond. We have many different payment plan options that can be tailored, suited to your needs, where you are at currently and your budget as well. And then once the plans are finalized for funeral or cemetery, we then meet to ensure that those plans continue to meet the needs and begin the 4-step process for the other half of your arrangements. Because when we think of end-of-life legacy planning, we think of funeral, which is celebration of life, how we want to be remembered, what that will look like that is meaningful to you and your family, and also cemetery options, whether that's for traditional burial or whether it's for our vast array of cremation options for perpetual memorialization, that sacred, meaningful place where friends and families and loved ones can gather for years to come to remember in perpetual memorialization. Also important to note, I'm not sure how many on the webinar today are snowbirds or like to travel, but as a part of our planning process, we also offer what we call our Journey Home Travel Protection. And what this is, for a one-time fee of only $595, you can purchase this travel protection that guarantees that if you were to pass away anywhere in the world that is over 100 kilometers from your primary legal residence, this travel protection It enables you to be brought back to your primary residence, even if that's from across the other side of the world, at no cost to you, but rather it's protected through this insurance, which again is a one-time fee of $595. We work with locating and engaging a local licensed funeral provider to handle preparations for a return, bringing you home. Recovery and transportation to a local provider of the deceased back home, and also handling all the necessary documents, including consular services if outside of Canada. Over the years, I've worked with families where they have had to repatriate or bring their loved one back home from where they passed away. And sometimes those costs can amount to tens of thousands of dollars. But in the case of Journey Home Travel Protection, that one-time fee of $595 covers you for life. And it's certainly something to consider if traveling is a part of your journey. So when we think about the advantages of pre-planning, of considering our legacy and how we want to be remembered, considering those legacy indicators of what's most important, family, friends, those who will be left behind to continue forward in our memory, in honoring us. Some of the advantages are noted. First of all, that your family knows your wishes. It can reduce the legal and financial burden for your loved ones as well. It can prevent emotional overspending at the time of need when everything has already been pre-planned and prepaid ahead of time. That protection also eliminates inflation costs. Again, as I mentioned, you receive a guaranteed funeral contract that locked in and guarantees today's rate, what you have prepaid, so that it protects against inflationary cost as time goes forward. It can make a very difficult experience at the time of need just a little bit easier for those you love. Now, I mentioned that as a licensed funeral director, I've worked with many families on an at-need basis for planning memorializations and celebrations for their loved one when they had passed away. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, the difference I have seen when I was working with a family where their loved one had everything pre-planned and prepaid for. Not that it lessened their grief necessarily, they were still grieving, of course. But the burden or the weight of decision making certainly had been alleviated from them. They were able to move forward knowing that they were simply following through with the wishes of their loved one, which had already been made in advance. On the reverse side of that, I've also had the opportunity to sit with families on an at-need level where their loved one has passed and these discussions were never had. Nothing was planned in advance or paid for in advance. And in these moments, in addition to the grief that the family is walking through, they are also dealing with that burden of trying to decide what they feel most appropriate of what their loved one may have wanted. Struggling even over decisions as simple as, are we looking at cremation or burial? I'm not sure what they had wanted. And so the advantages of pre-planning are vast. We've discovered that when somebody passes away, for the family that is looking after everything, there are a little over 87 decisions that need to immediately be made. And when planned in advance, over half of those decisions can be looked after in advance of the time of need. So there's great advantages when it comes to having these conversations, pre-planning one's wishes and prepaying for them as well. At Arbor Memorial, as I mentioned at the beginning in my introductory comments, we have over 40 cemeteries throughout most of provinces throughout our country. We're very proud of our cemeteries. I can remember, if you're like me, when I was growing up as a young child, I remember passing by cemeteries if I was driving with my family along the road, and the only thing I knew about cemeteries were, well, that's where dead people are buried. That's all I really knew. And the truth of the matter is that is true. However, we're very proud of the fact that our cemeteries are very serene. They are park-like atmospheres that are beautiful in how they're maintained and how they beautify our communities that they are situated in. In fact, we found that at many of our cemeteries, not only are they places of ongoing perpetual memorialization for families, but they've also become key areas in communities where community members come to walk through that park-like atmosphere, to come together and to join others in community and building community. Our cemeteries are meticulously maintained and landscaped, beautiful settings, serene settings. We have a multitude of options, from burial options, whether that's traditional earth burial, whether that's entombment in our mausoleums, whether that be indoor, like the picture you see in front of you, or outdoor. Many cremation options as well. You see here the picture in front of you, our indoor glass front niches where urns can be displayed and mementos, pictures, remembrances. That special place where even in choosing cremation, we can come to be present with our loved ones and to remember them. This is a picture of one of our nature walks. It's no secret that cremation certainly has become more and more a preferred method of disposition for many Canadians when they think of end-of-life planning. We're very proud of the fact that we have so many options when it comes to memorialization with cremation at our cemeteries. At a lot of our cemeteries, you see settings like this on the screen in front of you. Nature walks, beautified areas where surrounded by nature and wildlife and beautiful scenery, people can walk, and along the pathway we see remembrances, monuments, memorialization to our loved ones. Outdoor niches as well, like this that you see with memorials and remembrances on the front of them as well. Serving all faiths, cultures, religions, ethnicities across the board. This is a very important value for us. We're very proud of the fact at Arbor Memorial of the diverse amount of families, faiths, and cultures that we serve. In fact, this year, we will serve over 30,000 families across the country on an at-need level, not to mention facilitating serving them through their legacy planning and pre-arranging. Many of our cemeteries have what we call our on-site funeral homes as well. If you are in a community that has one of our on-site funeral homes, we're very proud of the fact that we can serve families from both their memorialization, celebration of life, and funeral needs on site of the cemetery as well, where they can, again, whether traditional burial or entombment or cremation, move from that place of celebration of life to cemetery, and then perhaps culminating in a reception in some of our beautiful on-site reception facilities. So if you were like me growing up, I think of yesterday's cemeteries, and you know what I'm talking about, those graveyard atmospheres, difficult and expensive to maintain, no room left for beautification. People may feel obligated to overspend on extravagant personal monuments. These places often at risk of vandalism. I know growing up in a small town that I lived in, that was often the view I had of cemeteries. And our cemeteries at Arbor Memorial, we're very proud of the fact that essentially the atmosphere we provide for families is the exact opposite of all of that. serene park-like atmospheres, welcoming to our community, all kinds of memorialization options. We know that there are costs associated with that, and the truth of the matter is that over the years, costs go up. That's just the reality of any industry and any business, and funeral and cemetery service is not exempt from that as well. For those of you that may be on the webinar today, perhaps you've already purchased cemetery property, whether ground burial or mausoleum or cremation, columbarium, niches, whatever it may be. Congratulations, well done. As we see from this graph simply shows that cemetery costs simply do not decline. They only go up over the years with the cost of inflation. And so, again, it reemphasizes the importance of planning now, securing now, so that we have peace of mind to live life fully, and also knowing when our time comes down the road that our loved ones, those closest to us, will be well looked after, knowing that we have looked after everything ahead of time. When you purchase cemetery property, you can plan with confidence, knowing a part of that investment goes to ensuring that funds are protected so that your property will be beautifully maintained forever. It's guaranteed by law. And at Arbor Memorial, we're very proud of our property teams across the country that are so invested in the beautification and maintaining that beauty at our cemetery properties. A part of that investment goes to the regular upkeep of lawns and shrubs and trees on our properties, planting of annual flower beds, removal of wilted flowers and wreaths, leveling and sodding and trimming of grave sites, snow removal in the winter and repairs to roadways, maintenance of our water drainage systems, repair of art and architectural features, and of course, all of the maintenance of our buildings, mausoleums, and niches. You can know that in planning and investing with confidence, a part of that investment goes to the perpetual care, the meticulous care and beautification of those special places in our cemeteries forever. And so when we think of our legacy planning, what do we value? What's important for us? How do we want to be remembered? Those final arrangements are either made only in one of two ways. The first, which I refer to as an at-need situation, those are done at a time of emotional uncertainty, where a loved one has passed away, and now as the surviving spouse or children or loved ones, we are following through planning funeral, celebration of life, cemetery, hoping that we are fulfilling what the wishes of our loved ones were, but not necessarily knowing for certain. The better way is planning in advance, together with your spouse or significant other, with your children, with your extended family or friends, planning in advance of those emotional trials at time of passing, where the discussion can be a little bit lighter, where we can take the time to properly look over all options according to your needs and wishes in advance. Again, I reiterate the advantages of doing this ahead of time so that your loved ones will know what your wishes truly are, so that you will reduce the financial and legal burdens of your loved ones and preventing over emotional spending at the time of need, protecting against inflationary costs by locking in that guaranteed contract today, and making a difficult experience at the time of need just a little bit easier for those you love as they navigate fulfilling what you had planned ahead of time. And again, as you meet with any of our trusted advisors, we can provide that helpful family estate planning kit that can help ease and begin the process even today. I mentioned that as we neared the end of our time together in this webinar, that we would have opportunity for questions should any be posed. But uh, I wanted to conclude by touching on some of the more common questions we often get asked from both a funeral and cemetery perspective. One of the most common: what about if we move? If I have funeral and cemetery arrangements in place, what happens if I move? Well, we know that life happens, doesn't it? And the truth of the matter is, if I plan ahead today and 5, 10 years from now, life takes a turn and I move elsewhere out of choice or necessity, yes, those arrangements can be moved to one of our sister funeral homes anywhere across the country. Cemetery arrangements can be transferred, cemetery rights can be transferred to one of our other cemetery locations across the country. Again, the benefits of pre-arranging, we talked about a number of them, but they far outweigh the cost of doing nothing and not having those conversations ahead of time. What if I pass before it's paid for? I know I can speak directly from a funeral perspective. One of the advantages of having that guaranteed funeral contract is, let's say, for example, I have planned ahead, and the best suited need for me and my family for my budget was to go on a 5-year time pay, where each month over the course of 5 years, I'm paying like an insurance payment towards my funeral. Well, the good news is that if I were to pass away before that payment is fully complete, the 5 years have come to a completion, because it is an insured product, my funeral will be paid in full. So God forbid, if I were to pass away in year 3, for example, of that 5-year payment plan, I can have that assurance that because it is an insurance investment, that it will be paid in full and my family will be looked after, not having to pay out of pocket for what I have planned. So let us help you complete your security puzzle today. You logged on to the webinar today because you saw an advertisement, whether on social media or perhaps at one of our locations, of thinking about legacy. How do you want to be remembered? And maybe, if you're like me and most Canadians, perhaps one of the most important legacy indicators for you as well is your family, your friends, those that are closest to you. How will they be looked after at the time of your passing? Well, we want to encourage all gathered today on this webinar. Consider your end-of-life planning as an integral part of the overall picture of your security puzzle. Estate planning, investments, wills, powers of attorney, end-of-life, memorialization, and cemetery planning. We can help you with that. We can make the process easy. We can help you navigate all of the questions that come with that. We can go over a detailed quote to be able to fit within a budget that works for you. And most of all, we can help you be provided with that security and peace of mind that you're looking after things today so that you can live life to the fullest with legacy in mind. So I encourage all of us to reach out to us today. You can go on our website, arbormemorial.ca. Also, for all gathered on the webinar today, you will receive a recorded link of this presentation today so that you can go back on it to reflect if there's something you've missed, and reach out to us, and we would be happy to sit with you and your loved ones and start the planning process today. So at this time, I'm going to move to our chat room and field some questions. So I have a question here from Trudy. Thank you, Trudy, for this question. It says, I've seen an example of a pre-planned arrangements and did not feel that the funeral reflected what paying the current costs would reflect. In other words, it felt like the funeral home cheaped out on the arrangements because it was paid for many years prior, and therefore the current value of the funeral was not there. How can one in a grieving situation be guaranteed that that won't happen? Thank you for the question, and Trudy. And first of all, I will say I'm sorry that you had that experience that you went through. What I can say is this: I can say with absolute confidence on behalf of Arbor Memorial and all of our locations, our funeral homes and cemeteries across all provinces, that when an individual or couple or family sit down with one of our trusted advisors and pre-plan their funeral and cemetery wishes, we are extremely detailed in that, right down to every item of importance and what the family values, documenting everything. That investment that is paid, not only is it guaranteed, but it is protected. So the investment that is paid does not go into the regular day-to-day account of the funeral home, but rather it goes into a trusted investment where it is protected. At the time of passing, when the one who is prearranged passes away, we make application for those funds to be paid, to be released to pay for the funeral at the time of need. And then what we do is we follow through with everything that was planned exactly as it was planned. If there is a shortfall on the investment, what I mean by that is if the investment does not accumulate to where inflationary costs have led to, in other words, there's not enough money in the investment to cover the current cost, we at the funeral home eat that cost. That doesn't fall onto the family because, again, the family had a guaranteed funeral contract. And then what we do as professionals at the time is follow through with exactly what the wishes of the deceased were. We meet with the family, the surviving spouse, children, loved ones, to go over in detail what was planned, what was discussed, and ensure that we follow through on every detail of it. Thank you for that question. We have a second question here. At what age or life stage should someone begin legacy and pre-planning? That is an excellent question. It's a question that I often get asked. And the easiest way for me to answer that is, honestly, the sooner the better, because there is great advantage to that. Statistically, we have found that the great majority of Canadians who start the discussions and taking action to pre-plan their legacy planning and end-of-life wishes is typically, 60 and above, late 50s or 60 and above. And there's probably good reason for that. I think it's, when people near retirement age, that comes with, the consideration that, boy, I want to start getting these things in order for my loved ones and family. But I would suggest even those younger than that of considering this because of the advantage that comes with that. For example, I mentioned I'm 45 years old, and I sit today and I pre-plan my cemetery and funeral wishes and prepay for them. I lock that guaranteed contract in, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that time of need will not be for a number of years from now. Well, what is happening with that investment is it is gaining interest over that time. Now, we know that interest rates aren't the greatest today, but nonetheless, I can have assurance that the investment is going to be there because I made that plan early on. So the answer is it's never too early to start. But statistically, we found that those who are at about that 60 or above tend to be considering this most often. Another question, is funeral planning and legacy planning different from each other? And should they be approached together or separately when preparing end-of-life decisions? That is a great question. I would say funeral planning and legacy planning are not different from each other, but they're all inclusive of one another. When I think of legacy, again, it's the totality of what I leave behind, what I'm known for, what was important to me, what I valued, how I will be remembered. And again, the most important legacy indicators of what's most important to Canadians we found are family, friends, loved ones. So when I think of legacy planning, it's the totality of all of those things I want to consider so that I have peace of mind and my family and those closest to me are looked after. That would include my financial investments. That would include preparing an updated will. That would include estate planning. It should also include that integral, often missing piece, my funeral and cemetery end-of-life planning. Why? So that I can be able to say, this is how I would like to be remembered, but perhaps even more importantly than that, that I can give the gift to my loved ones and families of them knowing that they are simply going to follow through with what I have already planned, that the burden of that decision making does not fall upon them. So it's all inclusive. A fourth question, this is a good question. How often should a legacy plan be reviewed or updated? That's an excellent question. And the truth of the matter is it can be updated or reviewed as often as you would like. I would say that as we journey through life, there are seasons or moments of great significance, aren't there? The birth of a child, and a marriage, a divorce, unfortunately, the death of a loved one. What I'm getting at is there are important or integral moments we have through life's journey that cause life to change for us. In those pivotal moments, I would always suggest those are good moments to review my legacy plan, to review or to update my plan. These are excellent questions. So those are all of the questions that I see in the queue at this time. This does conclude our webinar today. And we came right up to an hour. We were scheduled for 1 to 2 o'clock. We're at 1:54, so we did pretty good today. So again, I want to say a sincere thank you to all of you for taking time out of your day to be with us on this webinar. Hopefully you have found it engaging, that maybe it's answered some questions that you came with today, but most importantly, I would encourage you to reach out to us at Arbor Memorial. You can go online, arbormemorial.ca, and reach out to one of our trusted advisors to be able to sit down with you personally to start the plan together. Trust me, you won't regret it. It's one of the best decisions you can make when we think about leaving a legacy of love. Thank you so much. Take care.